The pregnancy test felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the weight of all my unanswered prayers inside its thin plastic body. I locked myself in the bathroom, the soft yellow light flickering above me, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid Av might hear it through the door. For 3 years this moment had lived in my imagination. I had pictured myself smiling through tears, calling his name, watching his face transform with disbelief and joy. I believed a baby would fix the growing silence between us, would stitch together the cracks that had slowly formed in our marriage. Love, I thought, just needed a reason to stay. I closed my eyes as I waited. 30 seconds felt like a lifetime. When I finally looked down, my breath caught in my throat. One line, just one. No, please. I whispered as if the test could hear me, as if begging might magically create the second line I so desperately needed. But it didn't. My knees gave out, and I slid down onto the cold bathroom floor, clutching the test to my chest. Tears streamed freely now, soaking into my sleeves, my chest aching with a pain deeper than anything I had ever known. It wasn't just about the baby, it was about hope, about feeling chosen, about believing I still mattered. Outside the door, the house was quiet, too quiet. I wondered when Arav had stopped waiting with me outside the bathroom, when he had stopped asking questions, stopped touching my hand at night, stopped looking at me like I was his future. Lately, his phone seemed to get more affection than I did. I washed my face, practiced a smile in the mirror, and walked out like nothing had shattered inside me. Arav was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, his tie loosened, his attention elsewhere. I stood there for a moment, pregnancy test hidden behind my back, wondering if he even noticed my presence. "Well," he asked without looking up. I swallowed. "It's negative." He nodded once. That was it. No hug. No words of comfort. No shared disappointment. "Maybe next time," he said flatly, already typing something on his screen. Something inside me cracked so quietly that even I barely noticed. That night, as he slept beside me, his back turned, I stared at the ceiling and replayed every moment of the past year. The late nights at work, the sudden privacy around his phone, the way he avoided conversations about the future. I had blamed stress. I had blamed myself. Maybe my body was failing him. Maybe that's why love felt distant. I pressed my hand against my stomach, tears slipping silently into my hair. "I'm sorry," I whispered to a future that might never come. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with my doctor, not because I had hope left, but because I needed answers. I needed someone to tell me why my body kept betraying me, or at least confirm what I had begun to fear. At breakfast, Arav barely spoke. He kissed my forehead absently before leaving, the scent of his cologne lingering like a stranger's memory. I watched him walk out the door and felt an unfamiliar emptiness settle in my chest. For the first time, a terrifying thought crossed my mind. What if the problem wasn't my body? What if the baby I was praying for wasn't the only thing missing from my marriage? I didn't know it yet, but that single negative line wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a truth that would destroy everything I believed and rebuild me into someone stronger than I ever imagined. The doctor's clinic smelled of antiseptic and faint lavender, an aroma that usually brought comfort, but today it only deepened my unease. I sat on the stiff chair, my fingers entwined so tightly they left indentations in my palms. The appointment was supposed to be routine, a formality after my negative test, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Dr. Meira, my doctor for years, entered the room with his usual calm demeanor, holding a folder that somehow seemed heavier than it should be. His eyes met mine, and I caught the slightest flicker of something unusual, hesitation, maybe concern. "Good morning, Annika. How have you been feeling?" he asked, setting the folder on the table. I forced a smile. "As well as one can be after a negative result." My voice cracked slightly, betraying the fragile mask I was wearing. He nodded, flipping through pages of my medical records. I reviewed your tests and scans. Before we talk about the results, I need to ask, has your husband been involved in any of your treatments? I blinked, confused. He hasn't been. Why? Dr. Myra hesitated, tapping the pen against his desk. I just need to know if he's been present or if there's been any medication administered without your knowledge. My stomach twisted. The question sounded absurd, almost impossible. I shook my head. No, nothing like that. He gave me a measured look, then turned the computer monitor toward me. Annika, I need you to look at this before I explain anything. The screen displayed my medical history, hormone levels, and a series of ultrasounds. My eyes skimmed the familiar numbers and images, but nothing seemed out of place until Dr. Myra highlighted a particular set of scans. You're not infertile, he said softly. Your body shows evidence that implantation did occur briefly. This isn't a mistake. I froze. I don't understand. The pregnancy test was negative, yes, he continued, but your system indicates that something prevented the pregnancy from progressing. Something external. My chest tightened. My mind raced. I couldn't breathe. External. Dr. Myra pulled up another screen, showing a recent blood panel. There's a medication in your system, a substance that prevents pregnancy. It's not something you reported taking, and the levels suggest repeated exposure. I stared at him, trembling. That's impossible. I haven't taken anything, I swear. He leaned back, his expression gentle but firm. I believe you. That's why I need to ask, has anyone close to you had access to your medications or personal items? A cold realization crept over me, sharp as a knife. The puzzle pieces of late night secrecy, unexplained absences, and the emotional distance of the past months clicked together. My voice was barely a whisper. My husband, Dr. Myra, nodded slowly. I'm showing you this because it's important to understand the truth. You were being sabotaged. The room tilted. I felt a strange numbness, a chilling blend of disbelief and anger. My mind replayed every moment I had once blamed myself for, every failed test, every sigh of disappointment that I had assumed was natural. None of it had been my fault, none of it. The silence was deafening. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but no words came. The betrayal was too vast, too intimate. It wasn't just the loss of a pregnancy, it was the deliberate dismantling of my future by someone I had trusted more than anyone. Dr. Myra gave me a few moments to process the information, and I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I saw my own reflection in the glass of the monitor, broken, yet burning with something else, resolve. I knew even then that this revelation was only the beginning. The silence in my marriage, the distance I had blamed on stress or routine, was not innocent. It was louder than words, and now I finally understood what it had been trying to tell me all along. A storm was building inside me, quiet at first, but with a force that would not be denied. And in that quiet fury, a thought formed that both terrified and empowered me. I would not let this betrayal define me. The truth had been revealed. Now it was time to decide what I would do with it. The room felt impossibly small. My heartbeat thudded so loudly I was certain the doctor could hear it echoing off the walls. Every instinct screamed to run, to escape the truth, but my feet were glued to the floor. I couldn't look away from the screen. I couldn't stop the words from forming in my mind. Dr. Myra's fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before he finally spoke. Annika, what I'm about to show you isn't easy, but you deserve to know the truth, fully and without compromise. I nodded silently, bracing myself. The screen shifted. My hormone charts, my scans, my blood work, all were highlighted with new annotations. Then came something I wasn't prepared for. A list of medications, complete with timestamps, doses, and the source. My hands shook as I traced the lines with my eyes. Medication levels suggest intentional administration over a period of months. A doctor, Mira explained quietly, and the source is someone with access to your prescriptions. I blinked, my mind refusing to connect the dots. Access someone like my husband. He hesitated, choosing his words with care. I'm sorry, Annika. The records, the pharmacy logs, they show a name, Arav. He ordered these prescriptions under your account, knowing you would never question them. My chest tightened until it felt like my ribs would crack. My knees nearly gave out, and I had to grip the edge of the chair to stay upright. My husband, Arav, the man I had trusted, the man whose hand I had held through every joy and every heartbreak. The man I had believed loved me enough to start a family with me, had been systematically destroying my chance at motherhood. No, my voice was barely more than a whisper, a fragile thread in the heavy silence of the clinic. It can't be true. Why would he, doctor? Mara's eyes were steady. He wanted to control the outcome. Whether consciously or unconsciously, your records and the evidence show repeated interference. The negative tests weren't your body failing you. They were engineered to prevent this pregnancy from continuing. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank back into the chair, tears blurring the monitor. Rage, grief, disbelief, they collided inside me with a force I couldn't contain. Every lonely night, every whispered apology to my body for failing, every look of distance in his eyes suddenly made sense. Every missed moment, every cold embrace, it had been deliberate. I forced myself to look at the screen again. There it was, the unmistakable trail of his betrayal, time-stamped and documented, the proof I had needed but had never dared to imagine. And beneath it all, the cruelest realization, the man I had loved, the man I had trusted with my heart and my future, had treated my womb as if it were a battlefield and me as if I were powerless. I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms, and I felt a strange calm seep through the storm of my emotions. Anger, sharp and pure, began to crystallize into focus. I didn't need to cry. I didn't need to scream. I needed strategy. I needed precision. Dr. Mara spoke again, softly. You have every right to be angry, Annika, and you have every right to protect yourself. But first, you need to understand, you are not broken. None of this was your fault. I exhaled slowly, my chest heaving. The weight of betrayal was almost suffocating, but for the first time, clarity pierced the fog of my grief. I was standing at the edge of a precipice. Behind me was pain, devastation, years of stolen hope. Ahead of me, I could reclaim everything he tried to take from me. I nodded at the screen, at the evidence, at the truth. I see it now. I understand. He's not going to get away with this. Doctor? Mara gave a small, sympathetic nod. Knowledge is power, Annika. And now you have both. For the first time since that single line appeared on my pregnancy test, I felt something entirely new. A surge of strength, sharp and unyielding, rising from the pit of my despair. The betrayal had been monumental, cruel, and unforgivable, but it had also lit a fire inside me I hadn't known existed. And as I left the clinic that day, stepping out into the cold, indifferent sunlight, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was no longer just a story about loss. This was a story about justice. This was a story about revenge. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and roasted coffee, deceptively warm and inviting. Arav walked in, expecting the usual quiet resignation from me, a wife shattered by disappointment. Instead, he found a calm I had cultivated with meticulous care, a smile I had practiced in front of the mirror until it was perfect, soft, serene, unthreatening. "Hey," he said, dropping his keys on the counter. "How was your day?" "Fine," I replied, my voice steady, almost sweet. I poured him a cup of coffee, handed it over, and watched him take it without suspicion. He didn't see the folder hidden in my bag, the evidence that would shatter his carefully constructed world. The months after the doctor's revelation had been a quiet war. I collected every piece of proof, his pharmacy orders, the texts he had tried to delete, the emails he never thought I'd access. I recorded conversations subtly, made sure every confession he let slip would be undeniable in court, and documented his every move. Arav had always thought he was clever. He had always underestimated me. I moved through the motions of life as he had become accustomed to, smiling when he smiled, laughing at his jokes, pretending to mourn our failed attempts at pregnancy. But inside, I was sharpening a plan that would leave him powerless. The betrayal had been cold and deliberate. My revenge would be the same. The day I executed it was perfectly ordinary. I handed the folder to HR at his office, just as he celebrated his promotion in front of his colleagues. I watched unseen as the room shifted from admiration to confusion, and finally to judgment. By the end of the day, his colleagues whispered, his promotion revoked, and the higher-ups scrutinizing every decision he had ever made. When he returned home that evening, I was waiting. He stepped through the door, radiant with self-satisfaction, oblivious to the storm I had orchestrated. Annika, his smile faltered as he noticed the folder on the table. I poured myself a glass of wine, took a slow sip, and finally looked at him. You thought you could control everything, Arav, even me. But you forgot one thing. Never underestimate the person you've betrayed. His face paled, and suddenly, the confident man I had once loved looked small and fragile. I don't understand. You don't have to. I said softly, almost cruelly. All you need to know is that your lies, your manipulation, your betrayal are no longer safe in your hands. He tried to approach me, but I stepped back, maintaining the serene distance I had perfected over months. I trusted you, I whispered, letting the weight of those words hang in the air, and you stole my future, so I took your mask, I took your power, and I left you with nothing but your guilt. For the first time he spoke, pleading, Annika, please. I shook my head, no, this is not a negotiation. This is the consequence of your choices, and I am finally free. That night, I lay in bed alone, but it was nothing like the lonely nights I had endured before. There was no heartbreak, no betrayal cutting at my ribs. There was only clarity, empowerment, and the intoxicating thrill of justice served. Weeks later, when I walked past a pharmacy, a small smile tugged at my lips. I remembered the first time the doctor had revealed the truth. The screen flashing the evidence that had upended my world. Back then, I had felt helpless. Today, I felt unstoppable. And then came the day I finally held a pregnancy test again. My hands steady, my mind calm. 2 lines, real ones, not manipulated, not stolen. My body was mine, my future was mine. I laughed softly, a sound full of relief and triumph. All the years of betrayal, the pain, the stolen hope, they had brought me here, stronger, wiser, free. Arav was nothing but a shadow in my past now, a ghost of a man who had tried to cage me. I didn't need to gloat. I didn't need to scream. His ruin was quiet, inevitable, and perfect. Sweet revenge, I realized, didn't come from rage alone. It came from reclaiming your life, your body, and your future. And as I looked at the 2 lines glowing on the test, I finally allowed myself to hope again, not for a man, not for someone else, but for myself. Freedom had never tasted so sweet.